Well, this is the session on pandemic teaching. And apparently when you put that on Facebook, because we tweeted something about the topic, apparently they censor it. So kind of interesting. They say it's a COVID topic, just for a little piece of information. Well, we've got 3 presentations, and the first one is from Knowledge One here in Montreal, and it's called Designing and Delivering Emergency Remote Teaching Support Services to Faculty. And our 2 presenters are Erica Giraldo and Farnaz Gholami. And so Erica and Farnaz, begin. You'll have about 18 minutes, and I'll give you some time warning so that you know that you're on time. Feel free to share your screen if you've got slides.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much for introducing us. Yes, thank you so much. Let me just try to share my screen right now. Screen number 1. Share. Okay, can you all see my screen? Yes, okay. So I'm gonna start. So hello, everybody. Thank you. I'm sorry, can you see only, okay, let me just see.
Yep, we can see your slides. They're beautiful.
My slide, okay. Sorry, I was just saying because I have my notes on the side. Okay, so once again, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our presentation, Designing and Delivering Emergency Remote Teaching Support Services for Faculty. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the Knowledge One is located on unceded indigenous lands. The Ganyeng Gaja Nation is recognized as the custodians of the land and waters on which we gather today. And Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples, and we respect continuous connection with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. So to begin, I wanted to let you know, Farnaz and I work for Knowledge One, a company that specializes in the design and development of online learning experiences for both higher education and private clients. Our company operates under the eConcordia brand on behalf of Concordia University, where over 32,000 students enroll in online credit courses annually. So I wanted to start by letting you know that our team set about designing a professor support service for emergency remote teaching on Moodle to offer to Concordia professors. This presentation explores that service model's evolution and the effects of its implementation. This was done in collaboration with the Center for Teaching and Learning and the Instructional Information Technology Services at Concordia University. We were very fortunate to have the collaboration of an amazing group of learning experience designers as co-authors for this presentation. They are Arezu Jamshidi, Lu Wang, and Winful Varela. This presentation focuses on eConcordia's remote teaching support services for faculty. The most urgent need was to ensure courses were swiftly converted online and fully operational for all students in time for the start of forthcoming academic terms. From our side, this involved 2 things. The first, deciding how to offer professors personalized, dedicated support with transitioning from in-class to online teaching and converting face-to-face assessments to online. And the second was moving away from our regular and more traditional production model in order to accommodate the pressing needs of Concordia faculty for rapid transitioning to online due to COVID. All of this involved helping our professors from the design and development of the course, outcome creation, tackling different technological and pedagogical challenges, considering real-life applications and implications and future relevance for the courses. Our services were in response to an acute and complex need. So it included pedagogical and technical support with areas such as helping professors convert courses and assessments to online formats, raising awareness on accessibility requirements, which mostly meant being proactive in accounting for the needs of an increasingly diverse student population, and making sure they were able to use course authoring tools effectively using Concordia's approved platforms such as Moodle and UJA. Our support was provided individually and via a customized site. Our service involved consultations with a learning experience designer. These consultations revolved around online pedagogy, accessibility, course creation in Moodle, audio and video recording, and course design. Plus, we offered a custom Moodle site with best practice resources and forums. Our services evolve throughout the academic year. So for summer and fall, we attended university committee meetings to assess the challenges professors were facing and thus ensured our services would capture their needs. We then organized an internal development team to brainstorm the design and plan of execution. A 3-level support services for professors was proposed, along with a detailed implementation plan and a survey to gauge the level of support the professors would need during the onboarding process. The service was next reviewed by the Office of the Provost, who in turn determined which professors should receive the support. For winter, instead of a 3-level support offering, we shifted to a fixed number of hours per professor to accommodate their own unique needs. The support services were tailored to professors' needs. So basically, we provided recommendations on tool and software selection, student interaction and engagement methods. We provided guidance on accessibility for alt text creation, accessible document templates, closed captions and transcripts. We also provided the review service or proofreading and editing, and we provided also ongoing support for the entire term on online pedagogy and tools and training support. Now Farnaz will give you more details on some of the tools and strategies we use to advise our professors.
Thank you, Erica. Hello, everyone. In the following slides, I'm going to delve deeper into the details of the mentioned services, as well as provide examples of their applications in some of our courses. Adapting in-class activities in order to fit the online learning context presented itself in the form of a negotiation between us and the professors. Based on their learning objectives, learner demographics, content, and their preferred teaching methods, we provided recommendations on how to modify their activities and assessments, how to evaluate the students, and what tools to leverage in order to best present the adapted assessments and activities. On the left here, we have a modified competency-based rubric for a group assignment, where students engage in an activity that aim to bridge the gap between theory and practice, encourage teamwork, and cultivate student self-reflection. This activity was originally an essay in the in-person version of the course before its adaptation to online context. Another note on the same class is that it was a combination of graduate and undergraduate students, and the professor wanted to encourage interactivity amongst these two cohorts. To accommodate that, we created a podcast assignment where graduates recorded a 20-minute podcast on a critical issue in the field as a group, and undergraduates engaged in by listening, commenting, and voting for their favorite episodes. So you can see this in the photo on the right, an example of podcast plugin on Moodle. Another important measure we took was to ensure that our online content was accessible to all students, compliant with current accessibility guidelines, and inclusive of all learner needs. We created documentation and training modules on including transcript for audio and visual content, implementing closed captions, making PDFs and documentations available and accessible to screen readers, and writing alt text for non-decorative images. Expressing commitment and respecting students' preferences in online course outline, lecture recordings, and during the synchronous sessions was our priority. On the left corner, we have our accessible PowerPoint template created with color contrast, size, font type, and course content chunking in mind. Professors were welcome to use this template for their lectures. Closed captions and downloadable transcripts were automatically generated by Yuja, a video sharing platform used by Concordia and reviewed for accuracy by us upon request. On the bottom left, we have a screen capture of Prop Support Moodle, in which professors were provided with a number of resources on accessibility and online learning pedagogy. These resources were available for professors to explore at their own pace and convenience. We identified keeping learners engaged and motivated during the online learning experience as a driving factor in effective teaching and learning. By providing opportunities such as making learners feel seen and individually cared for, granting access to different open communication mediums with the professor, and using interactive and collaborative tools such as Google Jamboards, we achieved higher levels of learner content and learner-learner engagement. With these features, learners reported more opportunities for collaboration and feeling that their course was more personalized, that they were not just a name in a Zoom meeting in the eyes of the professor. Here are some examples of these interactive spaces. On the top left corner, we have a sample feedback sheet created for a group blog assignment where each learner was responsible to provide constructive feedback to 2 of their coursemate blogs. These forums were then discussed in breakout rooms where teams shared the highlight of this activity. On the top right, we have an example of a Google Jamboard, an interactive and collaborative whiteboard that allows learners to simultaneously brainstorm ideas using images, markers, and sticky notes. Here we see a group brainstorming top 4 takeaways of the previous session in a Zoom breakout room. An important factor in online classes that were heavier on the asynchronous side was to create a deeper and more personalized connection between professors and learners. To achieve this aim, we suggested professors to offer audio recordings of their feedback on forums. We believe this brought variety, authenticity, and facilitated a bond between the professor and the learners. Next, Erica is going to share some of the feedback we received from our professors regarding the positive impact our services had on their course delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Farnaz. So yes, our support received, service received positive impact outcomes. We supported close to 2,000 professors during the 2020 summer and fall terms, and we're currently supporting over 50. The professors who received our services became much more autonomous in creating online materials and assessments during the subsequent term. And they also said that they furthered their skills with the tools and technology. So I wanted to share with you some excerpts, some of them that we received through a post-course survey, and some of them go as follows. So the first one, I am trying to apply the skills you inculcated in my course this semester, and at least some of my weaknesses have been overcome. Our student success very much reflects your remarkable work. You too lit some of the brightest spots in the darkness of the last semester, and I hope my winter class reflects your shine. Another professor shared, to know the team were accessible relieved a lot of my stress transiting to teach online. And another professor said, the semester is going very well thanks to Farnaz, who has been a tremendous help. I am so grateful for her patience and continued support in guiding me through the Moodle page and Zoom account. Without her help, I would not have managed to organize the content of my course online in such a smooth way. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Well, if nobody does, oh, good. Somebody go ask, please.
Thanks, Farnaz and Erica, for the great presentation. Have a question. Just wondering about the nature of Knowledge One. Is it a third party hired by Concordia? Because I don't know how the setup is. Or is it one unit within a center unit within Concordia, or none?
Do you want to answer that?
Yes, that's a very, sorry, somebody was.
You want me to answer that for you, or?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you want to answer that'll be great.
eConcordia and Knowledge One. Knowledge One, eConcordia is a wholly owned, not-for-profit company owned by Concordia. It is our e-learning provider. They operate within them a for-profit named Knowledge One. And so when we offer academic courses, it's always offered under the eConcordia label. But when we do services for other parties, it's under the Knowledge One label. That sound right?
That sounds amazing. Thank you, Sol. That's exactly
it all there. go on. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Thank you so much. And the second part of the question was, how many professor or faculty member did you support throughout the pandemic? Was it just open for people to come, or was it something that based on case by case, people, reaching out? How did you provide the workload? I'm just thinking about the workload. How did you manage it?
Yes, as I was mentioning, the main thing was that we work in close collaboration with the CTL, so the Center for Teaching and Learning, as well as with the IITS. And all of the professors came through their departments, then their department chairs would go to the office of the provost. So it was an effort made by the entire Concordia University. It wasn't like, oh, I am a professor, I want to go, I go directly to Concordia. No, they needed to go to their department chair, and that department needed to go to the provost, and then with the office of the provost, they would evaluate, okay, which professors need our support the most. And then they kind of divided them. So some people just came to us, some other went to the CTL directly. So it varied. And then when you ask for how many, for the 2020 summer and fall, we supported over 24, and we're currently supporting 50 in the winter term for 2021. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
We have a question in the chat, and from Jenny Stolna. It'll be unfortunately the last because of time. And they ask, I was wondering if you have any suggestions on how you support professors who continue to have challenges teaching online after you initially work with them. You seem to have been very successful in facilitating and building these skills in many instructors. So what are some of the strategies you've used to support those who need more assistance over a longer period of time?
Okay, that's Farnaz. Do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. So we were in very close contact with the professors and had weekly meetings with all of them as LXDs, me being one of them. And it was a learning experience for all of us throughout the semester. So they originally started with questions regarding course outline or the online context or even computers. And then as we moved forward, we both started developing skills and understanding this new reality of emergency delivery. So right now, it's mostly about the skills that they are going to carry forward. And some of them come in the form of training. So for example, we're troubleshooting in these meetings, towards the end of the semester, step-by-step, instructions on what to do if we are still going online in the fall, backing up some of the courses. Some of them are asking for demos from me, I demo something on the Moodle space, and then we take screenshots and then we write down the steps for future. So it's it really varies based on the professor's comfort level with technology, their competency, and also how innovative they want to be in future with the LMS. I hope I answered your question, or if there's any follow-up for more detail.
As much as I hate to do this, in the interest of time, we are going to move on. And our second, although it does seem like your response answered the question, which is great. So now I'm going to switch over to a different topic. I mean, it's still pandemic, but a different approach to it. Disrupting instructional models for serious game design and delivery following a global pandemic. And our two presenters are Amélie Poulet and Cameron Sheikh, both from Baton Simulations. So over to the two of you.
Thank you so much. Good seeing you again, Saul, by the way.
Same here.
Yeah. Hello all. Thanks for joining our session. I'm Cameron Sheikh, Director of User Research at Baton and lecturer at Concordia. My main area of focus is basically R&D of serious games for corporate training and business processes. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Amélie Poulet, Director of Operations at Baton, who is the brain behind the concepts we'll be presenting today. Our presentation will discuss an instructional model for serious game design and delivery following a global pandemic.
So what is ERP Sim? ERP Sim is a serious game, meaning it's a game where the main purpose is not to entertain participants, but rather teach through experience. ERP Sim is based on the core processes of an enterprise solution software called SAP S/4HANA, combined with gamification to allow participants in small groups to manage a virtual company and to experience for themselves the end-to-end process integration in a realistic business environment. The business-centered simulation allows players to ease their resistance to change by allowing them to experience for themselves the potential of the very complex solution, something that no amount of showing or telling in a traditional training could do as efficiently. Today, the solution has evolved to not only explore concepts related to experiential learning and change management in organization, but also to help building momentum for digital transformation and solution implementation. ERP Sim is not a new solution. It has been used for more than 15 years in the academic world, reaching more than 40,000 students in 250 universities. In the commercial world, the solution has been used in almost 60 countries to Fortune 500 companies such as IBM, Textron, Dell, but also large international corporations such as SAP, Lanxess, Essity, as well as public agencies like the American Navy, the Australian Defense, and the Canadian Treasury Board. In the commercial world, ERP Sim main strength is that it would allow physically to bring stakeholders together and to have them experience for themselves the powerful real-time analytics, the integrated nature of the software, and the collaboration and communication that arise from breaking the silos. As of January 2020, almost all of the ERP Sim events were delivered in a presential mode, and we didn't have the basis to deliver it in virtual mode for logistical and technological reasons. So we needed to innovate. When discussing the need to rethink the current model of this serious game delivery, we identified key factors to achieve a successful ERP Sim training. The first factor was that the session are instructor-led. In a regular ERP Sim session, the role of the instructor is to be a game master that guides the learning of the participants step by step, providing instruction and walking around the room during the gameplay to gather the general disposition of the group and intervene as needed. Given the complexity of the simulation and the concept, we identified that the session would need to remain instructor-led. The second factor is that the simulation depends heavily on the rapid passing of time, both in the game and in real time. In the game, 1 minute represents 1 day of business where many strategic decisions must be made. Given that it's such a central factor to the session and an information that must be known at all times, typically the time would be shown on a projector screen at the front of the room. To keep the same effect with the regular simulation, we agreed that the session would need to remain synchronous. And finally, collaboration and team communication are potentially the main key factor of the success of a ERP Sim training. The virtual training would then need to address the challenges of working as a group and as a smaller team and switching between both pretty much flawlessly to allow participants to retain a high level of benefit from the activity. Overall, while the building block for a virtual simulation were present, time was pressing to implement new ideas. Having seen a decline of 58% of the number of sessions delivered in March 2020 compared to the previous month, and a general drop of 62% compared to the previous year monthly average, it became apparent that changes to the instructional model would be required in order for ERP Sim to adapt to the changing reality of educational training, with most of the workers no longer able to gather physically to play ERP Sim. But this was not the first attempt to bring ERP Sim in a virtual mode, because previous attempts in the past had failed, amongst other things due to the absence of proper technology to carry the session, resistance of adoption of the online model by the participant, and missing component in the game itself. With all the participants being at home, additional challenges were emerging, such as user-side technical issue with the network, the computer, the audio, the video conference tool provided by the company, and so much more. Moreover, each participant has different level of skills and ability when it comes to working with those tools, which can easily become frustrating for both the participants suffering from technical issues and their team, who is being penalized by the absence of their colleague to help them. Finally, the game on average lasts about 3 hours, and it was challenging to convince people to join us for the 3 whole uninterrupted hours and also to remain engaged and focused to the task at hand. It became increasingly pressing to revise the delivery method to streamline the instructional approach for the trainer, but also to limit as much as possible the number of new technology and tools that the participant would have to learn to play the game.
So this required defining a new approach. For this innovation, we implemented our approach gradually in like a very iterative approach and focused on identifying issues from participant and instructor feedback, as well as our own observations. At first, we immediately noticed that there was an important decline in collaboration and communication between members of the same team, but we would have much less interaction from the participants with the instructor. Additionally, we noticed that it was much more difficult to have meaningful debriefs that would still capture the interest of the group without set prompts for feedback. Another important aspect that was identified early on was that compared to in-person sessions, in the virtual training, the variation in the learner's skills and abilities were extremely accentuated. The user experience was also much more pivotal in the virtual format. We would notice a much greater number of complaints, mostly linked to technological challenges completely out of our control. Own network speed, their devices' processing power, frustration with accessibility and technological literacy, ability to navigate both the game interface and the online meeting interface. It was a disaster at some points. But overall, we also noticed that while it used to be easy to get the participation and engagement of the players in the traditional format, that's when the instructor was walking around the room and able to gather observations. With virtual gaming, encouraging participation during those key moments of learning required a structured and easy to use approach. To mitigate these issues, we started implementing new recommendations and we defined a new instructional approach for ERP Sim, leveraging two distinct concepts, which we defined as scaffolded gaming and structured deception. On a user experience side, we also implemented two new roles in the simulation alongside the instructor as support, which were coaches and meeting managers. We also started requiring the participants to have their cameras on, to be unmuted when they were sent to the breakout rooms, so they could work with their team and so they could actually see each other and experience that in a real world fashion. And finally, to structure the feedback and debrief of the session, we decided to offer all the participants the chance to voice their opinion through an online polling tool. This is where we started exploring different visualization methods and settled on Mentimeter, which we will provide an example with in a little bit. To elaborate upon our approach, we defined these two sets of strategies, scaffolded gaming and structured deception, which we hope on exploring and defining further, perhaps developing a series of steps or checkpoints, creating a standardized process, which can perhaps be applied to other collaborative online teaching and learning situations. The first strategy, scaffolded gaming, is how we went about chunking the information presented to the learner so that they could progress through the game with as little cognitive load as possible. Essentially, our goal was to align the business processes and transactions with just-in-time instruction and feedback so that participants are not left on their own when completing the required tasks. Given we have little prior knowledge of our participants, chunking information in a reliable fashion was fundamental. It was evident from the onset that doing so helped create a level playing ground for the participants. Those who were slightly more knowledgeable were forced to slow down, whereas neophytes to ERP Sim were forced to keep up. Similar to how large-scale games have skill-based player grouping, this instructional intervention was probably the most benefiting from a scaffolded gaming perspective. And also of particular importance, presenting instruction through such a fashion also forced the instructor to have formal moments of interaction with participants, just like roaming the classroom. This feedback was central to minimizing frustrations and ensuring participants had moments to interact with their instructors and actually voice their concerns. Extracted from scaffolded gaming, we realized that a form of structured deception, where instructors withhold information so users can master skills in a proceduralized fashion, reinforced the feeling that participants were free to game, something that everyone was quite keen on when considering gaming, while providing moments for the integration of learning moments. Quite similar to the concept of suspension of disbeliefs in games, where the experience requires a level of voluntary immersion for the player to be able to buy into that world that is being presented to them. Doing so allowed for the integration of instructional moments, those we defined as essential scaffolds, and eased the participants into this new game environment. Giving the participants too much too soon was detrimental in our opinion, and suspending their immersion into the game development, in the game environment, was key.
In ERP Sim, the debriefing period is as important as the gameplay. It's the moment where the instructor leaves the participant to reflect deeper on their experience and how it relates to their situation and day-to-day job. In the traditional format, the discussion was started in the team, then the team would present to the group, but that model did not work virtually. One of the tools that truly allowed us to gather participant feedback in real time and give everyone a voice was the online polling platform Mentimeter. Mentimeter was from far our first choice, given its user-friendly interface, its cross-device capability, and the numerous customization available. The cost was also very low, and it's a tool we believe that all of our instructors would be able to adopt and implement in their own session without too much difficulties. With the help of the Mentimeter platform, we were able to pursue feedback and participation, and we also received a much higher rate of feedback from the participant. Mentimeter being anonymous from the respondent side, it allowed participants to openly discuss the debriefing question without fears of being called out publicly, but it also helped minimizing potential barrier to communication. Overall, participants seem to enjoy seeing everyone's feedback in an interactive, real-time manner and having the opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings following the activity.
So, as you can imagine, we did face challenges continually, and we continually to face challenges. So as we globally deployed the new instructional model for virtual ERP Sim, amongst our instructor network and all our collaborators, we faced some challenges. We were able to address most of them in the past year. However, we are in the process of developing recommendations and processes to help mitigate them in the future. Firstly, most of the training sessions, they're done with mixed audiences from all over the world. And linguistic issues aside, it can be difficult to manage and assume the proper pacing of the session, particularly as each group differs from others. And what worked with one group will certainly not work with another. We found that creating a common baseline through a scaffolded gaming approach did help to resolve some of this disparity between groups. Secondly, though we do provide a competitive and collaborative atmosphere and try to break that mundane routine of constant screen time, the move towards a virtual model necessitated concern for our participants' well-being, knowing that attention could wane if they were left to their own devices. Taking this into account, we had to constantly revise the structure of our sessions as we moved to a completely virtual experience. Doing so, sadly, was contraindicatory to our overall goal of having a set process and procedure which could be adopted globally. Accessibility-wise, I must be honest, we have work to do with both the adoption of and strict adherence to standards, which can ensure rich experiences for all our users. We plan on exploring and further integrating practices in line with universal design and W3C. That's high on the priority list. And as always, we have seen from a corporate training perspective, gaming is sometimes not regarded as highly as we would like. There are times where a simulated environment does not attest to the perceived needs of our learners. Hopefully, as we continue research of this kind, and as we further break down and add to the knowledge base of corporate training through games, we will see an uptick in their acceptance and adoption.
So in conclusion, the past year was quite challenging on many aspects, but through the challenges and difficulty, we were able to create new experiences for our learners with the revision and redesigning of our instructional model. This experience also helped us find new ways to have people reconnect together and create team building activities that force colleagues to collaborate and communicate in gamified fashion during this time. We strongly believe that the fun aspect of the game coupled with the training model is a great way to engage the adult learner, since sometimes we need to mix work and play, especially if work can be play. In the end, this innovation required a lot of investment in time and effort, but it made a difference in the lives of certain of our players, and it helped people find a positive way to reconnect with their coworkers and even connect with people from around the globe. We waited for this pandemic to look to ways to innovate and review our instructional model. But the one thing we learned is that we shouldn't wait for a global crisis to review our practices anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for questions. We have about 4 minutes for questions, so please ask some.
I have a question for Emily.
Unusual, but go for it.
Cool. How successful would you say we've been or you've been in deploying a virtual gaming model with such a large instructor network and such large clients?
So the main challenge was really on the side of the instructor, because we have a very large instructor network in a lot of countries. And these instructors are really, really resistant to change. So once we were able to showcase the benefits of the virtual model and also the easiness of doing the virtual teaching through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and other conference platform, I think we were pretty successful. And nowadays we have exceeded the number of sessions we used to have before the pandemic, and also all of our sessions are virtual.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Any other questions?
I can keep on going if you want.
Go with one more. We've got another few minutes.
Okay. I know all of us have experienced this in the past. The move to like the virtual platform for about anything has been a headache. Okay, like even conferences that I've attended virtually, it's almost impossible to get people to participate. People don't interact with themselves, with each other. It's just tough. Would you say that it's a sustainable model? Do you think we should be exploring such practices for the future, or is this just a one-time hit? You know?
I think that it's totally a sustainable model, because basically the reason why it was hard at the beginning to have people interact and feel like they were in a real classroom like we used to do was because they didn't feel the human connection. But through the gamification, we add a level of stress where they have to communicate and collaborate, and that leads to a lot of laughter and funny moments, and people in the end are super happy that they joined the session, that they connected together, and they don't feel like the experience was negative in any way because it was virtual versus in person. So we even have participants that said that it was less stressful because they didn't have to drive to a venue. They didn't have to like bring their stuff to a different environment and try to find like all the necessities they would have if they went to a conference center like we used to do. So I think it's totally sustainable. And of course, we have some optimization that we need to bring, but overall, yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. I appreciate your responses.
Well, thank you very, very much. We're going to move on to our third participant, but I'd like to thank Emily and Cameron for a great presentation. Our last presentation in this session is from Alice Charestes, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Leslie Schneider. Alice is from McGill, and Leslie is joining us from Visual Classrooms, and she's from the other side of the border, I might add. She's from Boston, the Boston area. So I turn it over to Alice and Leslie.
If you give me just a couple of minutes here, we're having a little issues on.
Oh, let's see what we can do to fix your issues. Anything I can do to help, let me know.
Can we all see the presentation in
Beautifully.
presentation mode? Beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Thank you very much, everybody. And we're going to switch gears a bit in the sense that we will be moving to something very particular, if you wish. My name is Alice Chorses. I come from McGill University. I have Leslie Schneider with me, and we have been working together for a couple of years now in trying to better support our students in their learning, more specifically in looking for active learning methods in teaching. I am an organic chemist by training. For those of you who have not taken organic chemistry, it's viewed as probably one of the most challenging courses in undergraduate. People dread it, but we need to make it we need to make it palatable, and we still need to teach it, and students need to understand what they're learning. What we're going to focus on today is a shift in methods. I will give you a little bit of what we've done pre-pandemic, and then you'll see that some of the tools that we have used pre-pandemic, we have then continued using them in remote instruction mode during COVID. As mentioned, organic chemistry being very challenging, we always try to focus on student learning and student experience. Before the pandemic, I have noticed a dramatic increase in my failure rate. Students were not doing as well as expected. And I had started playing around with active learning. More specifically, I have done, I started working on two-stage exams, and I've learned that by working on two-stage exams, one way for the students to prepare for the group part of the two-stage exam is to use visual classrooms. And Leslie, in a couple of minutes, will tell you a little bit more about visual classrooms. Now, since we moved into the remote part, of course, we lacked the face-to-face interaction. Students were worrying about being isolated. Of course, we have no ways of engaging them. And we found that building activities on visual classrooms that could help these concerns of lack of interaction or lack of engagement. So as mentioned, we were already doing a lot of active learning approaches. We continued, so during the pandemic, we continued with our active learning approaches by using visual classrooms. But one thing that we have focused on was peer feedback. So we have, once you will see what visual classrooms is about, then you'll understand better what I mean. But what we have tried to do is get students to rely on each other during their learning process. One of the big ideas that I always push forward is do not rely on a solution manual. Do not rely necessarily on a textbook. Learn how to learn, and learn how to rely and trust your classmates, your peers. So peer feedback, and if you want, peer assessment, was one of the big points of teaching in the pandemic, because we needed to move away from them looking at the instructor, if you want, as the main source of expert advice or expert opinion, not advice. So I will ask Leslie, please, to take us through a couple of the features of Visual Classroom.
Great, thanks, Alice. So what's Visual Classroom? It's a research-based collaborative learning tool, and it was initially funded by the National Science Foundation in the US and developed at Tufts University in Boston, where I am. Visual Classroom's interactive collaboration space is really the key. It was designed as a safe space for scaffolded social interaction around students, ideas, and artifacts. Students can work together to ask questions, seek answers, and make connections in any media that they feel comfortable with. Both the student artifacts and embedded analytics are formative assessment tools. They help instructors look beyond the surface to understand who their students are, what they know, how they come to know it, and what they're struggling with. And anchoring these conversations around students' ideas and work engages students by making their thinking visible as they reflect on others' contributions while creating their own. Visual classrooms, along with peer feedback activities, helped Alice's students get to know each other, feel more connected to their learning. During COVID, it really created a learning community of students logging in from all over the world. The platform was designed for social interaction, which made it easy for students to quickly capture, share, reflect on, and discuss and evaluate contributions with their peers. So I'm going to turn it over to Alice to show how she did this.
Sure. So we will. So again, talking about a little bit of design and the decisions behind the design. One very important idea in organic chemistry is making student thinking visible. There's the knowledge, the subject matter, organic chemistry, involves so many concepts, involves a lot of drawing of compounds, nomenclature. It's very hard to know if the students grasp the ideas and understand the material if you cannot see their learning. And you're going to ask, how do you see their learning? Well, organic chemistry, seeing their learning is drawing. Drawing compounds is how you see understanding. Moving or arrows, electrons, mechanisms, reactions, it's all drawing. Second idea was, as presented previously, this idea of students trusting themselves. They need to learn how to trust their learning, and by explaining to somebody else, they can trust their learning better. So we are challenging this concept of the traditional student versus the professor. Some of the students become, so quote unquote, tutors or helpers, and make other students better understand concepts. As Leslie mentioned, during the pandemic, this tool helped us very much reduce isolation. Students were working together in this online space. Anecdotally, we also noticed that they were coming together to office hours. So students that they were studying or helping each other, working together on visual classrooms, then they were coming together to office hours to have more of their questions solved. So to briefly take you through a visual classroom activity so you understand how the platform works, what we have done is we have designed activities in which we ask the student to solve a problem. Then the student can post the solution to the problem, and the platform is designed in such a way that students post their answer as if you want a sticky note, but they can also post drawing, they can post a video, they can post an audio file, they can post basically in any media form. So the first part of the activity is give me the solution to the problem I have posted. And then the second part of the activity is provide feedback to somebody else's answer. And the feedback they have to provide is by correcting somebody else's answer, saying this answer is incorrect because, or taking somebody else's answer that is correct and explain why is it correct. So we're talking about correct feedback and then constructive feedback. The correct feedback is the feedback in which they're saying, yes, you are correct. And the constructive feedback is feedback in which they have to explain why the answer might be incorrect, or how can the answer become incorrect if it's already correct. What would make it incorrect if we change something in the structure? Now, these being the activities, I also want to mention that one of the beauties of working on Visual Classroom is that no matter who is giving the feedback, you can go directly on the student post and provide the feedback either by circling a certain atom or by using a different color and highlighting. So it's very visual in the sense that on the same post that the student has created, you can then go and provide the feedback. Of course, that you can choose to further your feedback with text, or you can just leave a drawing and indicate with an arrow, please look at this again. To give you a little bit more on how the student feedback looks, right? So this is an actual assignment that we have done together, and you see that we have a student who has posted the answer of the question we have asked, and then this is the feedback from another student that is actually explaining why or where is there a potential mistake in this particular problem. Let me just take you further. We have surveyed our students both at the end of last semester and at the end of this semester. We wanted to understand how visual classrooms help them in the course. We found that about 82% of our students found that they learn better when they receive feedback from their peers. And also we found that 72% of the students feel that giving the feedback helped them learn better. So we have focused on both receiving and giving feedback, because we are trying to see how can we better, if you want, our visual classroom activities for the future. This is again something that we are going to continue even when we are not in the pandemic mode. It's something that we would like to keep in the course, and hopefully go back to two-stage exams and use visual classrooms as our tool to prepare for the group component of the two-stage exams. So as a brief conclusion, we did increase individual student engagement. They really liked participating, and they felt very safe and non-judged. They were all very happy to provide each other the feedback, and they did not feel that there is any negative connotation to that. It did improve our effectiveness of active learning. It's a point that we always try to have in our courses, and definitely this helped us make it better. Sorry. Whoops, what happened there? Very sorry. And it did help with the classroom community, and it very much helped me understand their way of thinking and their individual progress or group progress by providing them feedback on visual classrooms. We will be gladly taking questions. Yes, no questions.
Let's have some questions.
I have a question. Thanks for the
Sure.
presentation. I'm just wondering if you must have, you might have already covered, but I'm just wondering about accessibility of visual classroom, whether it's compatible with assistive technology, in a sense that if you have students with vision impairment or they're using assistive technology, they can access visual classroom?
We don't have any affordances related to vision, but there are other affordances related to hearing, etc. Visual Classrooms integrates with all learning management systems. I don't think Alice used it within hers, but it does, and that's a very common way that students and professors use it.
So it is compatible with the assistive technology, right?
Yes, yes, for sure.
There's a question in the chat that, if you don't mind, I would like answering. So there was a question regarding, did the students receive any guidance or tips on how to provide appropriate feedback? Yes, students received, as actually an activity on visual classrooms, very detailed guidance on how to provide feedback. And the activities were for grades. So part of the same question, part two of the same question is, were there any grades associated with students having to provide feedback? And yes, there were grades associated. It was a point-based system. So you have a point for solving the problem, and then you have a point for providing feedback, the correct feedback, and then the constructional feedback. So yes, we have points associated with this.
I think, as with any learning technologies, really, the key is as much the design of the activity as anything else. And we're really working hard on that. And particularly, we know that students struggle with giving feedback. So we've been learning how to create explicit instructions to guide students and scaffold that peer feedback activity. And students have gotten pretty good at it. And in fact, some professors that use this approach in Montreal have found that as students use it more and more, their answers become more detailed. I don't know if Alice has found that. They're not just good, bad.
Yes, but
feedback.
we have also encouraged them not to give just good, bad, and we really streamlined it in you need to explain. So it's the because that we really focused upon.
Yeah.
I know we have about 2 minutes left. Any other questions? I see a question in the chat. Anything else?
Well, if not, nobody has any questions. First, I want to say I wish you had been teaching organic chemistry when I attempted to take it, because I dropped it, I think, within a week or two. But I really appreciate the presentation. I want to thank all of our presenters today. I want to thank you all for your patience with some of the little glitches, which we anticipated, because whenever you start something new with it, unlike a physical conference, whenever we're dealing with technologies, and there are a few little logistical things that always are a little different when you're working online. So I really appreciate everybody's patience with it. In the end, I think we've had an absolutely amazing session. I'm so proud of all the presenters and really appreciate all of your contributions. This ends this session. And I encourage you to go to the Wonder Room and experiencing virtual networking. There's a small learning curve, but I think it'll be worth it because you'll get to meet some really cool people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.